Welcome once again, episode 6 of the Reckoning Podcast. Thank you to everybody that has joined us this far along the journey. We've made it this far, and even though all my guests are special, there's something distinguished about each of them. I can't say enough about this man that I have sitting here with me today. He is the program director for political science at UMBC University of Shady Grove, where we're sitting right now. In Montgomery County politics, he ran in the 2020 election for Board of Education, and he won the primary, made it to the general, but somebody else was elected. But we're going to get into that today. He is a doctor of philosophy, political science, and government, a prolific author, gifted educator. He was my advisor and professor in my time at UMBC when I majored in political science. And he's also now the host of the I Hate Politics podcast. So Dr. Dasgupta, the first question I wanted to ask you is, why do we hate politics? And would it be strange to love it?
Well, we hate politics because it is, I think, in part so hard to do. And you've heard me say this before, Matt, that politics is harder than rocket science, right? And this is why it is harder than rocket science. Rocket science is based on doing physics and math, right? And metallurgy, right? And working with materials. But you know what is harder to do than doing all of those things, physics, math, and metallurgy?
What was that?
To pay for all of that. And how do you pay for rocket science? You pay for rocket science with taxes. If you're going to have to levy taxes, then you have to have people that will levy them taxes, right? So now you have to have elections in order to find people who will levy taxes and who will spend the money, all of that. So and that is politics. That's why politics is harder than rocket science. Now, there are some things about politics that turn people off. Okay? First of all, it involves having vision, right? It involves showing a future to a whole group of people. But when you show that future, you don't really have control over that future.
Right.
Right? And so what happens is, if that future does not come about, then people go, oh, you showed me that future. It didn't come about. And so then you're trying to balance between a promise and a reality. When you run for an election, right? What do you do? How do you win votes? You win votes by telling people that you will do what they want, right? And so you find out what they want and you go, okay, we'll build you a school, we'll build you a playground, we'll make this road, we'll do this and we'll do that. And when you are elected, not all of it is possible to do, right? In fact, if you're elected to a legislative body, okay, such as county council, or even the school board is really in part a legislative body, but certainly Maryland General Assembly or Congress, right? You're one of many making that decision. And in order to work with the many to make that decision, right, you have to compromise. So you have to say, I'll build a school before, and let's build a port before we build a playground, right? But as soon as you do that, you've broken your promise.
So people feel disaffected when a promise is made and it can't be delivered on?
Well, but that's what I mean, a vision and a reality.
Okay.
They often have to, they're not, because they are in the future, they have to be reconciled all the time. And when you do that reconciliation, people go, oh no, you promised and you didn't keep your promise, right? So that's one part of politics that, people go, oh, you don't keep your word.
Yeah.
But without recognizing that there's a difference. If I were to say, I will build you the school and then we will go build somebody else's sport and then we'll come back to your playground, people would not vote for me.
Yeah. But you're telling it like it is.
Yeah. So that's the problem, right? And nobody has a nobody has a silver bullet to all of this. Nobody. Not the greatest president in the history of the United States, and certainly not, lowly school board candidate.
So it's all the dynamic factors between what you can promise and what you can deliver that causes people, I guess, to hate politics, is what you're saying?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is that.
Okay.
At the root of it. The other thing is that we think of politics as this thing that covers almost everything in the world. I mean, as soon
Absolutely.
as people come together, you have to decide what they want together. And discovering the preferences of a collective, of a group, right? As soon as you do that, you're acting politically.
Sure.
Okay? So, other people, for example, business people or engineers or preachers or professors, right, feel that they know more about that subject, right, a subject, and they feel that politicians should listen to them. Right? But the politician is actually making a compromise between the professor and the businessman and the preacher.
Yeah.
Right?
The deal
He's
broker.
not satisfying one group. He's trying to compromise between all those groups.
Interesting.
And so people feel like, I know more about this. How can you do something else?
Interesting.
Right.
Okay.
And so to your question about can you love politics, lots of people actually love it. People that are in the system. I don't personally hate politics.
It is what it is.
What I love about political science is the ability to study how different groups live.
Okay.
Okay, so I use this as an example a lot. I grew up in India, and India is a poor country, right? It's gotten much better in the last 30 years, but it remains fundamentally a country that is poor.
Sure.
And has low per capita GDP, what's called, right? But if you come to the United States, Indian Americans, right, have the highest household income of any ethnic group in the United States.
Is that right?
That's right.
Interesting.
And so, how did a group of people from there to here, what changed?
Yeah.
Right? And so, that I find a fascinating question, that comparative question. Right? Why is it that people want to come from Latin America to the United States? Or why is it that Russia wants to go into Ukraine?
Yeah, right.
Right? Why is it? Why does Ukraine not want to go to Russia?
Yeah, right.
Right? So, it's like that comparative perspective is exciting to learn about
Sure.
in political science.
I got you. Why do you think it is? Because people always say, oh, politics is a dirty business. You come in clean and you go out dirty and corrupt. Does that have to be the case when we're talking about politics and practice, or is there a clean way to go about it, do you think?
Well, lots of politicians, work within the rules. But the thing is, we set the rules, right? It's not as if there are no natural God-given rules of politics. Right? Almost
like
all
physics.
the rules of politics are man-made. Right? So within those man-made rules, people do live by by those rules. And so you don't see, for example, a slew of corruption cases in American politics.
Sure.
You do see, questions about why, somebody is taking campaign money from a certain, from the NRA or from, oil companies or whatever, right? I mean, that's an argument that's made. But that is allowed by those man-made rules that we
Sure.
made called the Constitution, right? Constitution's a man-made rule. I mean,
Sure.
it's not like it's not the natural order of things, right? We created a constitution. Some people, mortals, created it, and so, I think it's not necessarily the case that politics is dirty in the way that we break our own rules all the time.
Okay.
It is different from moral often the moral universe, if you will, right? Because in politics, as I said to you before, you need to show a vision and then match that vision up with reality.
Right.
Okay? And not all the time are those two things going to match up, right? And so when there is, a difference, people will go, oh, you're corrupt, therefore you didn't do it. Not necessarily the case that, it's in the future, nobody can tell the future.
Right.
Not even the best politician.
Sure. And that's when we talk about like the characteristics of a politician. Do you feel like there's certain gifts that are required when it comes to being successful within that field? Or are there certain character flaws that are also endemic, like pride? Oh, I have the idea that it's me that's going to solve the problem. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like what?
Well, there is pride. I mean, of course. If you, running for election is a prideful thing.
Sure.
I mean, it is necessarily a prideful thing. If you did not believe that you could solve a problem, why even bother? But as soon as you believe that you could solve the problem, I mean, the belief that you can solve the problem is in itself pride-inducing.
Right.
So I'm not going to deny that there is these things. But I think if you're looking for the classical sort of understanding of this is, so for example, in the United States, a overwhelming majority of our political leaders come from the legal profession.
Yep.
Right? They're lawyers. And you have to ask them why. Why are not more doctors becoming political leaders? Why is it that lawyers become so? So I thought about this a lot. And so here's my answer. If you look at the profession of law, right? The profession of law involves talking with city hall folks, talking with the public all the time because you're trying to understand regulations. So if you represent somebody, for example, a small business owner who's trying to get a permit, right? You're interacting on behalf of the small business owner. You're interacting with the city all the time, and you understand not just the processes, but also the people, right? On both sides. So you understand the small business owner side and you understand the city side, right? And so what ends up happening is that you soon start to develop a network of people. That networking is perhaps the most important thing in politics.
Okay.
Right? And by that I mean networking usually has a negative connotation. Sometimes, hey, you're networking, but networking in a positive way, right? When you know people, what is the opposite of that? People know you.
Yeah, sure.
Right? If you don't know people, people can't know you.
That's right.
Right? So that's what I mean by networking. And so they have this entire network. And they develop this network, most lawyers do, as part of their regular job. Now, a doctor has a network, right? But that network is a very limited network and circumscribed by confidentiality. I mean, if you're going to a doctor, right, the doctor is not making your case public.
Sure. That'd be illegal.
Right? Yeah, and the doctor is not going, oh, that guy, I told him to lose weight and he doesn't lose weight.
That guy.
Yeah. And so, so obviously, so I think there's a natural limit to the networking abilities in other that others do. Businessmen also become politicians, by the way, because they are more sort of in the networking sort of type of function.
I got you.
The thing to remember is that if you are the kind of person, right, who has to close down shop in order to go network, which is typically a doctor would have to do that, right? So you have a doctor and he wants to network in the political field, he'll have to close his clinic and go.
Spend time doing politics.
Correct. And so then people say, oh, why did he close his clinic? He must expect something from this networking, that'll make up for his losses of closing the clinic. So that, in fact, often turns out to be a, argument for corruption.
Right.
But if you're doing something as a regular expected part of your job, then people will go, no. So in politics, I like to say, particularly in democratic politics, you have to marry private and public good. Lawyers are able to marry public and private good in the, as they do their job, they are developing their networks. Doctors cannot do that at the, in the same way. And if they were to close down their shop, their clinic, and go do the networking part, people will be looking at them going, why is he doing this?
Not providing that service.
Expect?
Right.
So instead, that's why we get people like lawyers becoming more political leaders, because they develop their networks as part of their regular job.
I
so
see.
it's a marriage of public and private good.
Okay. So you are a professor. You ran for office once. Describe that experience, and would you do it again?
Well, the second part of the answer is fairly easy. Yes, I just have to figure out when and how. So probably not in 2022. But
It's too close. It's coming up.
Not just that.
I was looking for a soundbite. So this is it. He's proclaiming.
No. It's probably, even though, as you know, the courts keep pushing the filing date back, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So in fact, if I had to do it, I would do it. But I don't think I'm gonna do it. But in the future, maybe. All right. So what is my experience of running a campaign? Extraordinary.
Cool.
Extraordinary, because I had an opportunity to run a campaign at a time when the world was shut down. I don't think this opportunity will come again for a very, very long time, and certainly I do not hope so.
Yeah, Jesus.
But because of COVID, I was given an opportunity to really rethink what political campaigns are about. And I lost because of COVID, partly because of COVID, because, I don't know if you know, but I had the endorsement of the teachers union.
Saw that.
It's called the Apple ballot, right? But the teachers, because of COVID, decided that they would not be at the polling booths like in the past, handing out the Apple ballots. And that's where we lost, essentially. Okay, so I lost because of COVID, but also seeing COVID in running a COVID campaign, an extraordinary opportunity to think about what campaigning is about, right? So first thing, we were forced from doing any kind of direct contact to doing electronic campaigning. Okay, so it was Zoom campaigns for the first time.
First Zoom campaign.
Yeah. Then we, had to reconfigure all our spending. So, Facebook isn't my favorite company for a variety of reasons. I use it, obviously.
Sure. We have to.
But, 90% of my campaign budget went to Facebook.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it was entirely an electronic campaign. And then towards the end, what I was doing was I would go stand in farmers markets where people would show up. And I'd stand at the, at the entranceways of farmers market, holding my sign and trying to answer questions. So, it was a really, really different way of doing things. I had to push on ideas and thoughts, and issues that I knew. But I also now know why I lost. So one is the reason that, obviously, teachers were not handing out Apple ballots at polling booths. But also the fact that when local elections, as I said earlier, is a lot about networking.
Sure.
Right? So if you are well networked, you are more likely to prevail. You're more likely to be able to use the internal channels within the network to do it. I have taught in Montgomery County since 2009. But I only started living here in 2016. Okay? So, but when I ran, I had lived in Montgomery for 4 years, though I had been involved in Montgomery County education for 11 years. So I think I was a little bit behind in my network and how that operated. I was running against somebody that had been in the PTA system and a parent advocate for a long time, and she had access to networks that I did not.
Okay. So it does all come down to networking, really, in terms of being a successful candidate, who you know.
Matt, as I do the candidate interviews, I realize this more and more, that I think candidates know that what really drives local elections is their network rather than issues. So therefore, on the podcast, I find candidates less than well prepared on the issues, which is what I want to talk about.
Interesting.
But I think that is because they are putting their time into network building rather than into finessing the issue.
Do you think that would make them weaker in their role if they were to be elected, if they don't spend time learning the issues? Or a less well-performing politician, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, so the stock answer to that actually is that a politician, especially in democratic politician, is a generalist, is not a specialist.
Sure.
Their task, right, is to bring people together, networking.
Right. There you
over
go.
having subject matter expertise that, this is the way to create a sanitation system. They don't need to know that. That's the stock answer to it. Now, I will say two things to that. If you believe that you don't need to know issues at all, then what's going to happen is that the subject matter experts will drive the agenda and you won't as a political leader.
You'll have to rely on them.
Yeah, and then that has an impact. Okay? And this is especially true if you're trying to fix something urgent. And I would call the situation in our schools something to fix urgently, right? If you don't know about teaching, if you don't understand education, right? If you don't really know how to put together a syllabus, for example, right? Things like sort of basic, parts like that, then you're really at a disadvantage when it comes to making sure a quick, fast reform, right? In the regular, scheme of things, yeah, you can have generalists and they will, talk to enough subject matter experts and try to find the truth that way. But when something needs to be fixed, like now, you need to have subject matter expertise.
So, like in the school board specifically, it would be good to know the processes, having been an educator yourself, so you can apply that knowledge to.
Right, and it's not just being an educator in that way. So actually being in the classroom, right? Actually being responsible for creating an environment in which learning can happen, right?
I got you.
So I think that there's a relationship between being knowledgeable about issues and networking, and I think candidates focus more on networking, at least for the purposes of winning.
Okay, but that being a generalist isn't necessarily a weakness. It's just kind of a reality in terms of how you have to perform as a candidate versus what you actually do.
That's right.
when
I
you
mean,
get into
so
the
the
office.
expertise of the politician is in bringing people together.
Right, okay.
Right? The expertise is not in how to build the roads
Got
or
you.
the
I
schools
got
or
you.
whatever it is, right? So I think that's the difference. And but the other thing is people don't see bringing other people together as a profession. They see it as a skill,
Right.
but it's not in their minds something that people should get paid for.
Interesting.
And so when they get paid, when politicians get paid for that kind of thing,
Say,
they're like, but managers, right, are typically bringing people together. That's their job.
Yeah.
It's not to do, but to manage, right?
Interesting. I got you. Understanding social dynamics. You mentioned democratic politics a couple of times. I'm wondering if there is a party that you prefer, whether it be Republican, Libertarian, Green. I don't know. The world is yours, but if you don't mind me asking, what party would you affiliate with, and what did they do better
Okay.
compared to the others?
That's a public information, by the way.
Oh,
I am
okay.
a registered Democrat.
Yeah, I figured.
Okay.
I figured that was the case.
Well, and what Democrats do better, right, is an avowed commitment to the most vulnerable.
I can see that.
I think that alone makes being a Democrat worth it.
Because I wouldn't say Republicans even think along those terms in their politics.
Correct. So I think Republicans, I like to say that they are right on small things and wrong on the big ones.
Interesting.
And Democrats may be wrong on the small things but right on the big ones, is how I look at it.
I can see that. Because from my perspective, it doesn't always seem like liberal policy always translates well in practice. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if that's true.
Well, any policy when it meets reality. So first of all, understand, right? I say this in class, and I don't know if I said it to you before, but here it goes. Any policy is an experiment, right? It's an experiment because it may have been tried elsewhere, but it has been tried on the population you are going to try it on. And if it's been tried, then it's not a new policy, right? So if it's truly novel, then it is an experiment by definition, right? You don't know what is going to be the outcome of the the experiment. You have certain hypotheses, you have certain expectations, but there is nothing that you can say with certainty this is what's going to happen, right? And those that do, I think, do a disservice because we don't know, right? And so if every policy is an experiment, and people don't like to hear that because essentially you're saying I'm experimenting on you.
Yeah, you're
right.
a guinea
So that's
pig.
another part of hate politics issues, right? So, but that's what it is. And so any policy when it's put in practice will meet ground reality, and it'll change, it'll morph, it'll become something else, and it'll have unintended consequences and costs and all kinds of things, right? There is the other thing I think to understand, Matt, is that there is never a situation where there is no politics or policy.
Sure.
There is always something there, right? You may not agree with it, right? You may think that, whoever made that policy is not that smart, but it's never non-existent.
I see. Thinking about national politics, like pan out, people will often say America has the greatest, most advanced form of democracy that ever was. I wanted to know if you thought American democracy was truly exceptional, and if so, what kind of supports that idea, or is it?
I like to think about the American exceptionalism in a couple of different ways than I think it's usually spoken of. First, I do think the United States is an exceptional democracy in the moment. Okay? In the moment, in 1789, there wasn't another democracy.
Interesting.
In the moment, in 2022, few countries can say they've pushed trans rights or LGBTQ rights as far as we have.
Sure.
Right? So in the moment, I think we are exceptional. Are we timelessly exceptional? No.
That would
Because
be.
other people catch up.
Yeah.
After we were the first democracy, but other people became democratic too.
Which countries do you feel like are the most mature democratically in terms of comparing themselves to the United States if we are the furthest ahead?
I didn't say that. I said something different. I said, on the issue of democratic politics, such as electoral democratic politics, Other people have caught up with us. I'm not sure we are ahead.
Okay.
Right. I'm saying we are ahead in the moment in LGBTQ rights as opposed to a lot of the world.
So you're saying we are exceptional because of what we have accomplished legislatively in terms of human rights and...
You are thinking of exceptionalism over time.
Uh-huh.
I am thinking of exceptionalism in the moment. I think there's a difference between what you're saying and what I'm saying. I think we are exceptional in 1789 as we are exceptional in 2022 or even 1991. Or in that moment we are, right? But we are not timelessly exceptional.
Because you can't tell the future.
Not just future, but even in the past, once we demonstrated that universal, I wouldn't say universal, white male franchise was a possibility. Other countries had white male franchise very quickly. Yeah. And then they got to universal franchise. So what I'm trying to say is that in the moment we are exceptional, but I don't think we are timelessly exceptional. Okay. Others catch up with us and have caught up with us in many ways. The other way I think that we are exceptional relative, I think, especially to Europe, where a significant part of our roots lie, right, is that our government system can move at a pace that those governments have never been able to move. In terms of how fast we can go. So for example, whether it's the 2008 crisis or COVID or, even under Trump, we spent billions of dollars into a vaccine and produced a vaccine, right? Which other country? I mean, others did it, but nobody did it with the kind of way that we did this. It's almost like we did a Manhattan Project,
right?
With the vaccines, right? So, and of course, BioNTech, for example, the Moderna BioNTech vaccine is in part, I think, German or has some roots there. But I think the important part is that we're able to turn two circumstances quite dramatically, right? And this is not always good. Right? For example, we are washing guns.
Yeah.
We're exceptional that way.
That's true.
Right? We've been washing drugs. We're exceptional that way. Right? So, exceptionalism is not necessarily positive and timeless.
Interesting.
Right? It is positive in some ways, and it's not positive in others. And I think exceptionalism as a concept is more relevant in the moment than forever.
So in terms of America is the greatest democracy, that may be true in a moment, but it's not necessarily the case in the scope of history.
Well, when comparing 1789 to other countries in 1789, I mean, which one had...
there was nobody. Yeah, okay.
Right. In 2022, right, we are, significantly ahead on LGBTQ rights, I would imagine, than a large part of the world, right? That's the kind of thing I'm talking about, right? It's not timeless, right? Other countries will catch up with us, and then there'll be some other issue that we will turn out to be exceptional in.
But other countries are exceptional in other ways.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Other countries are exceptional too. I
Okay.
mean, there's no doubt about that.
Okay.
Right? Because, for example, we don't have a proportional representation system, which is a way of electing leaders that accords which sort of recognizes, I should say, minorities much better than what is our system, which is pluralistic, almost majoritarian system, right? So, that is not an invention that is here.
Yeah.
Right? There are other inventions that are here. The vaccine happened, right? The nuclear weapon happened. Not all, obviously not all positive.
Yeah,
Again,
seriously.
as I say, but I think the term exceptional, as we use it, is not a timeless term.
I got you. Okay. Well, first let me ask you this. Do you feel like democracy and authoritarianism are kind of equal opposite concepts? Like you have democracy on one end, authoritarianism on the other side. Do you think that makes sense just as a...
Dichotomy?
Right. Because that depends whether I ask this next question or not.
Well, it's a difficult question to answer quickly. Yes, we do. There is political science literature that looks at scales, right? Going from 0 to 10, where 0 is authoritarian, 10 is democratic, and sort of 5 is midway. There are various other scales as well. And so there is this sense that there is a continuum. But I think that democracy and authoritarianism often can coexist in the same polity. Okay? So for example, right, we were considered to be democratic and slaveholding at the same time. So democratic and authoritarian at the same time. Right?
Interesting.
So there are aspects there are things like that that are fairly common around the world where it is hard to sort of dichotomize authoritarianism and democracy. Now I will say something else, is that again, when you make them into dichotomy, right, democracy and authoritarianism into a dichotomy, you're looking at a snapshot, right? It is almost, democracy is never free of peril, never. It is precarious every day that we are entrusted with it. Or better to say, every day we practice it.
Yeah.
Not even entrusted, because obviously we take it to be our own. Right?
Sure.
So every day we practice democracy. Okay? Each one of those days, democracy is periled.
Okay.
All right? And so it's not ever the case that we have some kind of situation where once you get it, you got it.
Right.
Right? And January 6th is a stark example of how a country that had, has made huge democratic strides can fall behind.
Right.
Right? We still put knees on, people's necks and kill them.
Sure.
So it's not that democracy is it's always imperiled, in my view. And we have to fight to defend it every day that we live.
So it would seem that you would say democracy is a more desirable system than one that is authoritarian. So does a society become more advanced the more democratic it gets, and less advanced when it's more authoritarianism?
Well, I think you have the sense that this is a linear progression of some sort.
That's how I'm seeing it in my head. It's
but it's not
democracy's up here and boo.
It's not linear. It's not linear.
I'll say, is that even a real way to look at it?
Well, I don't think it's as linear as you think it is, right? Look at Latin America, history of Latin America. Simon Bolivar starts the liberation movements from Spain. They become independent, but not really. But this, and then they all become authoritarian in the starting the 50s, 60s, right?
Sure.
Brazil and Argentina, everybody falls, right? And then starting again in 85, 86. I mean, people start becoming democratic, right? So it's always like a two-step, right? And I don't think it's that as linear as we believe it is. And that's what I mean by democracy is in peril every day, is that we could go back to non-democracy. I personally would like to live in a democracy.
Right. Yeah.
Over an authoritarian country any day.
But within those democracies, there are authoritarian forces that could assert themselves and maybe take things in a different direction.
It happens all the time.
Interesting.
It happens all the time, and we only need to look, not just the January 6th, but also, I mean, look at the South for a long time, right? You know, look at how some of our people are, how we treat some of our people. I mean, it's not, that's not a, I mean, so we have to fight every day is what I'm saying, right? Every killing of an innocent person by the police is a loss of democracy, is a threat to democracy.
Yeah.
When that happens, we have to sit up and do something about it.
I wanted to ask, and I guess you touched on it in that last question, but how stable do you feel like our institutions are in terms of those buffers or supports that hold up American democracy? Was Trump really such a, what's the word? Like I'm seeing a wrecking ball. Do you think he did as much to undermine the institutions as perhaps people say? Is it strong? Is it really weak? What do you see?
Let me start to try to answer that question a little bit philosophically first.
Oh, yes, please.
Right? So, if the majority of elected leaders in any society, right, democratically elected leaders decide that they don't want to hold further elections, is that a democratic act?
It is not.
Why not?
Because you're taking the people out of the process and making it something more authoritarian.
But the argument there is that they are elected by the people and represent the will of the people when they are, in fact, abrogating elections. So, genuinely elected people, right? Genuinely elected people, right? Decide to say we don't want to have elections. And this happened, right? So this happened in 1933, right? People elected a group of people in Germany, and they decided, well, hey, we're not going to have any more elections. So authoritarianism often comes not in the form of, tanks or airplanes or even different looking people. The threat to democracy is there. It lies inside, right? Can a democratically elected government decide that democracy is too much for right now?
They could, but then it would stop being a democracy.
Well, no, because they decided democratically to abrogate the system. So that I know, exactly what I mean, right?
Yeah.
That's the point. So to me, right, the threat to democracy is in it. That's the whole, right? Hitler went through that. Can we go through the hole? Can Trump go through that hole? He tried. And he failed. This may still happen. The other thing I want to say is, predicting the future is for God.
Sure.
Predicting the future, we do it all the time, by the way. Yeah? We attempt at it. Mortals attempt at it. People that run the stock market, right? They're trying to predict the future, make money via it, right? And they have prediction models and all of this, and we say, we do it all the time. Should you take a dark street or a lit up street? Those kinds of things, right? But true, prediction about what's going to happen is very, very hard and is essentially undoable, right? What we end up politically, what we end up doing is that we look at various scenarios and try to place some value on all of them, and then be prepared for as much as possible to be flexible. I think that's what we have to do. In terms of, there may be in the future instability. As I said, every day democracy is imperiled, right? So I don't take the stability of political institutions in the United States or anywhere else for granted. I know that I have to defend it every day. I know that I have to fight for it every day.
Do you think they were particularly weak in 2020 when there was civil unrest and a lot of stuff going on in the streets? Was that a perilous moment?
Oh yeah, it was very perilous
Yep.
because of the reason I just explained.
Got you.
It's the people that, a duly elected president. Trump was duly elected.
Right.
Right? A duly elected president decides to say, oh, this election did not
Occur. It was false.
it was fake, right? So it didn't show the true results. How do you prevent that?
Well, he wasn't successful. I mean, he was not. There was still the transfer. He left when he was supposed to, and I guess that's the institutions holding up.
I think that that's not inevitable. I do not believe it could have gone either way. I don't believe that you can rest on your laurels and say, oh, the institutions worked. No, institutions ultimately are made of people. Right? They worked this time literally by the skin of their teeth. They may not work the same. If a similar thing were to happen again, that may not happen. I keep going back to the idea that democracy is imperiled every day of our lives. Right? Democracy is not something you achieve and put on your mantelpiece. Right? It is what we do. It is how we live every day.
So Trump was not able to retain his office because enough people agree that this is not the way we operate, and therefore there was no path forward for him.
At this moment, yes, that was the case. That enough people voted against him, right? That enough people stood up against him. But there is no guarantee that that's going to happen every time.
I got you. If somebody was particularly charismatic, or if there was like a revolutionary moment of spirit, a populist spirit among the people, maybe somebody say, I'm sitting right here and you can't take me out.
Well, the thing about Trump is that he's charismatic, but he's also incompetent.
I agree.
I mean, the worst thing would have been if he had been competent. I mean, then we would not be talking like this.
A more savvy person like Putin might be able to consolidate power.
Well, I mean, Trump thinks Putin is a genius.
Yeah,
But I'm not sure Putin is the answer, by the way. I don't think he's savvy or anything. I just don't think Trump is authoritarian
Sure.
in his mindset, but he's essentially an incompetent person. Because, I mean, he succeeds in some ways, but he also fails in others. So, his success and bankruptcies, for example, his business success and bankruptcies go hand in hand. They're not separable.
Sure.
Right? So similarly, right, he's charismatic. It's incredibly charismatic, right? And for reasons that, we don't quite fully understand. But administratively, he's incompetent.
Right. I see. Do you see America as a whole as being in relative decline compared to countries like China, which seem to be ascendant? Is our status and position in jeopardy, do you think?
I take a very different view of this. After World War II, the leaders of the world decided that they were going to try to minimize the possibility of future global war, and we haven't had one, by making countries interdependent on each other. Okay? What happened with China and the US? In 1969, 70, 71, when Kissinger went to China, Nixon went to China, the United States was instrumental, right, in returning China to the world order, right? Taiwan used to hold the UN security seat. And it was the United States, among other countries, that moved to remove Taiwan and replace it with the mainland China So the United States has been instrumental every step of the way in making China what it is. And then look at the economy. Would China be China without making iPhones?
Nope.
I'm not sure. Would China be China without doing, without having access to the U.S. market? I'm not sure. Yes, they own, $1 trillion in U.S. debt. If I owed you $1 trillion, would you want me dead?
I would want it back, certainly.
No, first of all, would you want me dead?
I'll probably send people to.
You would not want me dead. You would want me to live forever so I could pay the $1 trillion back to you. Because if I'm dead, I'm gone.
Oh, I see.
If China was really, really like going, oh my God, the U.S. needs to be, subjugated or whatever, they will lose their $1 trillion.
Got you.
So, okay. And maybe maybe they can hope to gain more than $1 trillion in that process. I don't think so. So I take a very different view than this sort of decline and rise and all of that. I think countries are truly interdependent, which means that it's very difficult for two countries to actually have a conflict. And Russia and Ukraine are showing you.
Right.
Right? They are showing you, Russia, Ukraine, Europe, are right now showing you what the consequences of interdependence means. Russian gas is still flowing through Ukraine to Europe. I mean, that's just a mind-blowing concept. In the middle of one of the worst wars I would say
in the last 100 years or so.
Not 100 years, 15 years, right? Because Afghanistan was pretty bad. Iraq was pretty bad. 15 years, right? So in a tremendous war, right? How is it that no gas pipelines are hit?
So got to keep it flowing. Money still has to be made.
So that's the interdependence issue, right? Is that we can harm them, they can't harm us. So to question, whether China is in relative moving up and we are in relative decline, I don't think that is the right way to think about it. Okay, the other way to think about this, if we did not have China to manufacture almost all our things,
right,
would our economy be as big as it is today?
Probably not.
Exactly. One reason why we have a consumption-led economic growth in the United States is because other countries, including China, produce for us. So it's all very well for people to say, get upset about China and all of that, but they are buying Chinese goods all the time.
You can't live
so
without
just
it.
if you really want to start doing that, let's try not to use any Chinese products and see how much you consume after that, what your lifestyle is. Certainly no iPhone or Samsung.
So if we were to become less dependent on China and they're less interdependent on us, that you think that would actually make more likely the chance that the two would go to war because the interests aren't as tied up?
Correct. That's
Okay.
correct. I should say Samsung is Korean. I beg your pardon. So I just want to make sure to clarify that.
Yeah, Samsung is Korean. We don't want Samsung coming after the Reckoning podcast.
I think we are way too tied together. Now, it's not that there cannot be conflict. There is, obviously. Russia shows both that there is interdependence and there can be conflict through interdependence.
Right.
Even with interdependence.
The oil keeps flowing
Yeah,
even in
the
a
oil keeps
war.
flowing. So, yeah, I don't foresee deliberate conflict between China and the United States. I see competition. I see, sort of rubbing each other the wrong way. Sometimes I see, perhaps over time, if that gets too hot, American companies starting to find other places to manufacture. So, no, I'm not pessimistic that way.
Okay. Speaking of pessimism, do you feel like the polarization that we have in America right now, where Democrats see Republicans as the enemy vice versa with Republicans and Democrats. Do you think we are polarized to a point where there is no return, or if there is a way back towards comedy or the center, I guess, do you think that's even possible at this point?
Do you know what Hamilton and Jefferson used to say about each other?
Oh, do tell.
Really bad things.
Okay.
We are not even close to that.
Yeah, true. We're not shooting each other's in duels and
yeah, we're not, and not calling each other's private lives into question,
right,
in the same way that they used to do at that time. Do you remember? Have you read the Lincoln Douglas debates before the Civil War?
Mm-mm.
Listen to what they were doing in Congress after the Civil War, during Reconstruction, and thereafter, and post-Reconstruction. So, I think America is also exceptional in our polarized politics. The period of American politics that seems to be non-polarized, so to speak, right, is a unique period of the Cold War, when an external threat drove both Democrats and Republicans to kind of agree. Even then, I mean, at the height of the Cold War, you had McCarthy.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Don't forget. We talk about polarization. He was running witch hunt trials from Congress. I mean, this is nothing.
Right. We don't have that today.
Yeah, no, this is nothing. Yes. So there is disagreement. I imagine that we will have some kind of party realignment, but it's not easy to have party realignment. People say that demography, as it changes, is going to change American politics, and it may very well. Mm-hmm. But I am again not as pessimistic as others are. It is a very difficult place to be. There is no doubt.
Yeah.
There is no doubt, and if we all don't work together, we will get there. So so I think I should end with this, right? Is that the future is not inevitable. Mm-hmm. If the future was inevitable, you would be what is called a structuralist. You would believe that the structures of the world are such that this outcome is predetermined, destiny. No. The future is in our hands. I don't believe in the destiny of that kind.
I got you.
Right? So if we are going to have a second civil war, so to speak.
That's right where I was going.
Right? Is not inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
It is going to take us to do that. And if we are going to escape that future, it is going to take us to make that happen. It is in our hands to determine whether or not America continues to survive as a viable nation. It's not inevitable. No.
So it's not that you can read tea leaves and say, yes, we are trending towards a second civil war. It's just dynamic factors that may lead us in that direction versus something else that might happen.
As a professor of political science, that is the answer I'm looking for in every paper. Mm-hmm. Contingent. Life is contingent. It depends on human agency. We make the change we want to see.
The future can't be predicted. All right, speaking of reading the future, Wednesday Wipeout, kind of a hot button or very current topic is the Ukraine conflict. How likely is it that the US and NATO enter into that conflict based on, whether they're using chemical weapons or even talk of nuclear weapons?
Very unlikely.
You don't see us getting involved at all?
No, I don't think so.
Simple as that?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we learned from the nuclear era. Mm-hmm. That if you have nuclear weapons, then you will deter some kinds of actions against you.
So you don't think Putin is so irrational that he would resort to that?
I'm not sure it helps to think of Putin as irrational.
You think he's a rational actor? I think
He's
he's crazy
doing
like
what
a
he
fox.
wants.
Yep.
I think he is doing what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
He has announced it many times. We always are surprised by this, right? When Bin Laden attacked, he had been promising to attack for a bunch of years.
I told you I was going to do it.
When Putin goes into Ukraine, it's not like he hasn't announced this. For 8 years, he's been in, in eastern Ukraine, Crimea. I mean, so I'm not sure surprise is the right emotion here.
Yeah. Yeah, I got you. Okay, so not likely to get into the conflict. Another hot button issue. If you turn on Fox News any given day of the week, you're going to see crime, smash and grab, people, going into cars and stealing them. Do you think there is actually a crime crisis occurring? Because this is stuff that I guess is on people's minds going into the primary. Is this just the right messaging, this crisis, or do you think there is factors that might be leading to more petty crime on the ground?
So again, writing history in the moment is hard, but I did for my podcast interview all four candidates for state's attorney, which is the top prosecutor in Montgomery County, and now I've interviewed both candidates for Maryland Attorney General. That episode is not out, but should be out shortly.
It's coming.
Okay, so I say that because we talked about this a lot. There seems to be some increase in some sort of crimes, homicide in particular, and then for a moment, for maybe a few months, in Montgomery County at least, carjackings. Now these carjackings are interesting because I found out, based on what these folks told me, is that they were young people, sometimes 14, 15. They were taking cars and driving them 2 blocks and leaving them there. Stuff like that. And they believe that this is the result of sort of the disorientation of the pandemic.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's an argument. I'm not sure that's exactly 100% correct, but it is an argument that we can make that, the pandemic has dislocated, a lot of people, and especially young people, and so they did not, so they may have, up to hijinks for no reason.
Right.
So, but apparently, carjackings are now down. It's less of an issue. The homicides is a little bit more difficult. It's unclear, whether these are deaths that occur from between unknown people or known people. I think it would make a difference knowing that, and I don't know if our top prosecutors know that clearly at this moment. There's also talk about guns and ghost guns. So obviously the fact that the entire country is awash in guns is a problem. We don't need them. Why are we allowing these weapons of death into all kinds of hands? Mass shootings, especially in schools, remain a problem. But if you look at what used to be called crime, right, which is street crime, it's mostly down.
Right.
I mean, it's been down since 1990, 91, 89, something like that.
Sure.
So it's historically down. Whether it'll go back up again, I think. So the other thing to remember about crime and violence never increase everywhere at the same time. They're always clustered. They're always a clustering effect. So if you look carefully at clusters, I think you'll get a better sense of why it is, where it is, who is doing it. Like I said, it's unclear to me whether the homicides are the result of violence between people that know each other or don't know each other. And those, if based on that answer to that question, I think it requires different policy prescriptions. All the COVID type, the COVID causation that, people, the pandemic causation, right? The argument would be the homicides happen between people that know each other, right? So it's mostly domestic violence is essentially what it is. And that has a different solution than if it is between people that don't know each other. So under what circumstances? Is this a drug deal? Is this just what
indiscriminate violence?
Yeah.
I mean,
what is it? I think it's also, I think, mass shootings.
Sure.
School mass shootings is what is driving some of that.
Interesting. So when the people on the right say it's all clustered in the cities, look what's happening in the cities, this is a result of liberal policy failures like no cash bail, stuff like that, you don't think that would be entirely accurate?
I'm not sure that's accurate. I think, think about this. We haven't finished talking about opioid deaths, right? And the methamphetamine addiction problem. That's a largely outside of city,
Sure, that's rural.
urban center problem, right? So why is that not part of the discussion then?
Sure.
Is that problem solved?
It's ongoing in the countryside.
Yeah, we train people for Narcan still, right?
Yep.
And so, look, maybe this is the time to go back to your first question about hating politics. We use examples and data and, facts to burnish our case, whatever our case may be. And everybody does that. I do it. My opponents do it. You do it. Your opponents do it. So, it's not extraordinary. What I think we need is better ability on a part of those listening to this to get past the rhetoric and the argumentation to some sort of reality check. I think the big problem is that we don't study history. We certainly don't emphasize civics in school and college, and so I think the long-term fix is there rather than telling people, oh, you can say this or you can't say this. Right?
I got you.
Ted Cruz is going to Ted Cruz no matter what.
Yes. Nothing you can do about it, I guess. Slightly different question. If you were the president of the United States and you look at the southern border and they say, my God, it's porous, it's like a sieve. People are coming through, they're unchecked. This is just terrible what's happening. What would you do different, or should anything be done? Is there even a problem with what's happening?
So it's a hypothetical question, and especially hypothetical and poignant because I am a naturalized American citizen.
Sure.
So I'll never be president.
Oh, well, just saying, if Sunil Dasgupta ran for president and that wasn't a rule, and he was his running mate.
I just want to, but it's worth prefacing my answer with that.
Well, how come?
Because I'm not. I will never be president. It's constitutionally not possible for me to be if I was not born here.
I think that's bullshit.
Well,
I hate that.
You may think so, and I welcome you to fight for it.
I will. I got you. We're gonna make this happen.
But I think, from my point of view, it's such a hypothetical that I almost never think about it. Okay, first, but I'm going to answer your question.
Okay.
Second thing I'm going to say is, it is absolutely the case that I think about my children being president. Okay, so while I am not going to be ever, I hope my children, their friends, their peers, that generation, that's, maybe somebody from Aspen Hill
Could be the president.
could be president. I would love to see that, right? I would love to be alive to see that, right? Okay. Now to your actual substantive question about what on earth to do.
But it sets up the context
Yeah,
of
but
the answer.
I want,
Right.
yeah, because it's an important context for me.
Sure.
It may not be for other people, but to me, that's my thought.
I got you.
Okay. So with the southern border, right? Borders are meaningful. They are not meaningless, right? Borders have to. There's a difference between Tijuana and San Diego, and that difference is why people from Tijuana come to San Diego. Okay, it is the difference in the way those societies are run, right? And that's not to say Tijuana is not run, well or anything, but I think what has happened in San Diego is clearly run better in terms of people have a better living standard than, not everybody again, but generally, right? So that's the point. The point being that the borders matter, right? And the borders, if they matter, then you have to defend them. Okay? The question is, how do you defend them? Right? A few things. There is an understanding, right, that we do need more immigrants in this country, right? Especially to do the kinds of work that native-born Americans appear not to want to do at the wages available.
Right.
Okay, I want it at the wages available because I think everybody would go pick strawberries if they were paid enough, but those strawberries would not be available in Costco thereafter.
Right.
Right? Because those will be available only in a Gucci store.
Gucci strawberries. Imagine it.
Yeah. So that's that's the problem with it, right? If we continue to have our economic system, we will continue to need labor that is not as expensive as it would be if we close the border. And so that's the reason to manage that border more wisely. Right? But defending the border, managing the border, none of this justifies separating kids from parents.
Absolutely.
Justifies putting kids in cages. None of it. And if they are there and they have come for asylum, we have to treat them as humans.
Sure.
And if we don't treat the people that come to our door with humanity, then are we humans? More than what it says about them, it speaks to us. Are we human if we don't treat the person at our door humanly? Okay? There are some long-term things that can be done that we have in foreign policy that we have really got wrong. Whether it's in Mexico or it's further down in Central America, interventions, all kinds of things, right? We have to try to make those societies more livable. That is upon us, because we broke some of that, right? And so we have to go and try doing that. We can't wash our hands off. And then we have to treat the people that actually make it here, treat them humanly.
So it's kind of a two-pronged approach. You're saying the United States has a responsibility to make these places more stable, more livable, while at the same time, if people are fleeing violence or war or instability in the southern region, it's like we also have a responsibility to care for those people who show up at the door and are seeking asylum.
So what is very interesting? In 1890s and even later on, almost 30% or even more, I think, maybe even as much as 50% of Italian Americans who came to the United States actually went back.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So immigration used to be this cycle, but it's one way now. And it used to be cyclical even in the southern border, because people come to work in the summer and then go back in the winter, like the butterflies, right? And so, but we can't do that. I think when you make the border complete, so tight that movement across it becomes impossible, then people come and stay. If you have a better option of cyclical movement, I think you'll get something out of it. But I think the problem there is the long-term expectation in Southern America, not the United States, but in South America essentially, is that sooner or later the United States is going to close this border. I'm not sure how you can change that perception. If you could change that perception, I think you will see a more cyclical immigration pattern.
And that would be preferable to what we have right now?
I think so.
Okay.
I actually think so.
Yeah, I agree.
Because, what that happens, what that'll do is, then it'll redistribute some of its income in a sort of more immediately, and rather than having to send money to your relatives, you can take your money back and build a house there and come back here, work and build a house, which is, all of the Middle East is like this, right? In the middle, people from all of Asia, I mean, there are, in Dubai or something, I mean, it's an Asian, it's mostly an Indian subcontinental country because of the number of people from there, rather than local Dubai people. I mean, they're few and far between.
It's very
and they run the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
They run the whole thing, and then but they can't live there forever. So they make investments. They build a home back home and stuff, and we are an interdependent, globalized world, as we talked about, and so that's, I think, part of it.
I got you. My final question is very salient, I guess you could say. Why do you think we're experiencing inflation, and is it because of social spending, stuff like Build Back Better? Do you think that holds water, that argument?
So this is a good question, actually. There's, again, just like crime, people don't really know. There are hypotheses, right? So the mainstream hypothesis of this seems to be around the idea that supply chain problems are causing this, rather than, so there are two kinds of inflation. I don't know if you know. So there's a demand pull inflation that comes from having more money, and there's a cost push inflation that comes from supply chain problems, right? So right now, I think they're saying it's cost push inflation, that because of supply chain, things are becoming more expensive. And tell me about it, because I'm trying to buy a car. My son's driving, and it's very hard.
It's a little higher than maybe.
Not just high. I mean, we're trying to buy an electric vehicle, and they want dealers now want $5,000 over retail price.
Wow.
So I'm like, I have never paid that much for a car.
Yeah, seriously.
So to go back to your inflation question, so those are the two different types of. So the mainstream idea is about cost push inflation, and the criticism of that is this demand pull. So if you look at it really over, I think even 30 years, 35 years, inflation has historically been very low. And part of the reason for low inflation is that no matter how many dollars the United States adds to its economy, around the world there are enough people that are willing to hold the dollar forever and ever. Okay, so I think that the answer to your question lies in understanding dollar viability as an international currency rather than just domestic questions. If you think about it a little bit, we've added a lot of money to our financial and economic system, and this money is going to dissipate. I mean, it's going to sort of go down. People that have it will further down. So it's going to move in ways that we don't know, and move outside of the U.S. I think so long as the dollar remains the international currency, I don't see really sort of breakaway inflation.
Okay.
But obviously things are going to sort themselves out in terms of the supply chain. And what's going to need to happen is not that I think prices will go down, but I think wages will start to move up, and we're already seeing some of that happening. And also, companies are reporting record profits.
Gotcha.
In Maryland. I don't know if we have billions of dollars in surplus budgets. Maryland has a budget surplus for the first time in 40 years.
Wow.
It's amazing. So it's never been the case. So the question is this a one-time thing? But this continue? But even in Montgomery County, with property prices increasing the way they are, right? Obviously, tax from the property is also going to increase.
Right.
And the government can only, if you live in your own house, government can only increase your tax by 10% every year. And so it's a slow increase, but it's going to happen.
Right.
Because if you bought your home for $450,000 and now suddenly your home is $750,000, then
might make some money.
Yeah, you have to. Your tax burden's going to.
Sure.
You'll be paying more in tax, so the government is going to have more money. But I think I see a lot from government people, a mindset of deficit, which now, given the surplus, I'm wondering where they get it from.
Yeah, because there's this, you see it on the news all the time, the perception that the economy is actually in the tank when in reality, things appear to be moving quite strongly. So it's like a disconnect between the perception and the reality.
Well, we had an episode on that, on I Hate Politics.
Check it out.
Yeah, check it out. December 31st. It's
very relevant.
It's called The Politics of Budget Surplus. And it includes Maryland General Assembly Majority Leader Eric Ludke and UMBC Professor Roy Myers. We talk about the politics of budget surpluses.
Very cool. Maybe we'll leave it at that right there, actually. I Hate Politics podcast. It's out. What platforms can the people find your content on?
Well, you can find the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. So whether it's Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, YouTube, wherever you want. Look up I Hate Politics podcast. Matt, I have a question for you.
All right, please.
Why did you start this podcast?
Why did I start this podcast? Somebody actually asked me this yesterday, and I said, people have always told me that I had a good voice for radio, media, stuff like that. There's always been a creative kind of side to me in terms of making poetry or wanting to be a rapper. But then by about the time I was 18, 20, I guess just starting out here, actually, I kind of put that stuff to the side, focused on studying more. But there was always kind of something in my heart, I guess, that I knew I wanted to do something creatively. So I actually saw what you were doing with I Hate Politics. There was another podcast called Green Light Talk. Shout out to them, episode 3. And I'm like, you know what? These people are doing it. It's like, I wonder if I could kind of take that concept and move in a similar way. So, I had to thank you for the inspiration, not only for this episode, but for this podcast in general. And man, it's just been, like I say, episode 6, just getting started, but It's been quite a ride so far. I hope it continues.
Well, good luck. You know
Thank you,
something?
sir.
Lots of people have told me that I have a face for radio.
Well, there you go. See, look, I'm the voice, you're the face. Between us, we're the whole political body. All right, guys. Dr. Sunil Dasgupta, thank you for being here. This is The Reckoning, and we'll see y'all next time.